Hey, my name is Mike D. Kozlowski, and this is my project, Knowing Nature Means Knowing Your Neighbors. Now, neighbors is a word that we all know, and it is commonly in reference to the people who live in close proximity to us. Most people know their neighbors in one way or another, whether we have a close personal relationship with them, or just know their names and a little information about their family. Although we usually think of our neighbors as being the people around us, we have many other kinds of neighbors. Most of us live in areas that are surrounded by plants and wildlife, and we should get to know them as well as we know our human neighbors. Even if we just learn their names and some information about their family, it is beneficial to us to know them. Just spending time with these different neighbors can be beneficial to one's health in many ways, as Pergams and Zerdik present in one of their papers. Even though it is beneficial for people to know these neighbors, few take the time to get to know them. In fact, numerous studies have shown that in our society, fewer and fewer people know the names of the flora and fauna that are abundant in their region. Balmford and others found that kids recognize and can name fictitious characters, in the case with this study, Pokemon, better than they can plants and animals that live in their region. One reason for the lack of knowledge and connectivity with nature is society's shift toward a more sedentary lifestyle as a result of fascination with new electronic entertainment media, such as video games, movies, the internet, and cable TV. Pergams and Zerdik coined the shift away from outdoor activities toward a more sedentary lifestyle revolving on electronic media as videophilia, and noted that it can have negative effects on children's development and leads to negative health effects. They wrote in one of their papers that children who have direct experience with nature were found to be at a lower risk of ADD, form higher cognitive functioning, and have an increase in self-discipline and emotional well-being. The entire blame, however, cannot be placed solely on the advancement of entertainment technologies. In many places, development leaves very little available land for plant growth and wildlife habitat. In some extreme instances, the closest that some people get to nature is through virtual nature, which is experiencing nature through exposure on the internet and on TV. So in some cases, the entertainment technologies don't take away from experiencing nature, but in fact provide the only nature that some people will experience due to their environment. The new technologies are a double-edged sword. They can show us things in nature that we would not normally see, but at the same time enable us to spend time indoors rather than outdoors experiencing nature for ourselves. Additionally, virtual nature often sensationalizes nature's dangers and beauty, which can lead to unnecessary fears and disappointment when one's out in nature. According to a Bixler and Floyd paper, disgust, sensitivity, fearful situations, and desire for modern comforts were three factors that played a significant role in the reasoning why kids do not go play outside in nature. This sense of fear and disgust of the outdoors is something that can be formed by direct or vicarious experiences with nature. This points out that media can and does have a large role in influencing people's perceptions of nature. If children constantly see movies and TV shows with killer bees, snakes, and spiders, then they will be less likely to want to go out in nature, where they are more likely to encounter these creatures and find themselves in a scary situation. Children that have not had many direct experiences with nature are less likely to care about the environment and environmental issues. When these children grow up, they will be less inclined to take their kids out to experience nature when they become parents, and a bad cyclical pattern will be created. The remedy to this is a term known as Ecoliteracy, which is defined as accumulated ecological knowledge. And if this knowledge is passed down to the children, then they will have a better understanding of what really is in nature, and it will seem less scary to them. Much like how meeting a neighbor makes that person less scary, because they transform from this stranger next door to a friend. So let's quit talking about the benefits of nature, and go out and experience it. Here we are at the plot, and as you can see, both aquatic and terrestrial plants grow here. I'd like to discuss all the plants, however I'm only going to focus on 6 of the larger trees. 3 of these 6 trees were sweet gum trees, and I'm going to start off by introducing those to you. First up is Big Daddy. He's the largest tree on the plot, which is what earned him his name. I always thought of Big Daddy as the ladies' man of the plot, because he always had birds hopping around his canopy and on his bark, but I guess that'd make him more of a bird's tree than a ladies' man. The next sweet gum tree is George, who got his name by mistake. I initially thought that he was a bald cypress because there were cypress leaves in the water near him, so I named him after George Costanza from Seinfeld. But once the leaves came out during March, I quickly realized that he was a sweet gum tree. The third and smallest sweet gum tree is Twiggy, who received the name because when I first visited the plot, it looked like a twig had just been stuck into the ground. But by March, Twiggy had filled out nicely. So there are their names, but what good are sweet gum trees? Well, the sweet gum tree actually has a history of ethnobotanical uses. The Cherokee and the Rappahannock used the rosin or inner bark as an anti-diarrheal for diarrhea, flux, and dysentery. The Cherokee also used the hardened gum as chewing gum and made salves for dermatological aid to put on top of wounds, sores, and ulcers. Today, sweet gum is used for lumber, fuelwood, and pulp product. It's also an invaluable source of food and shelter for animals. The next tree species I'd like to introduce to you is the dogwood that was on the plot. I named him Perro. This tree went through one of the most noticeable and colorful changes from February to April. When I first arrived, the tree looked very thin and had little color. Over the months, I watched buds form and change from a grayish color to green and purple, before finally bursting open with a brilliant white. The tree looked completely white with the flowers. It was neat to see the entire flowering process. Aside from looking pretty though, dogwoods do have some ethnobotanical qualities. The Cherokee used the bark like aspirin by chewing on it to relieve headaches. Many accounts report the bark being used in baths to help children with worms. The bark of the roots can be used to make a red dye, and the wood can be used as tool handles and is even used today to make golf club heads. The third tree species is an American holly, which I started calling Bumpy for obvious reasons. Bumpy was more like a cluster of 5 trees that shared the same base underground. Bumpy must have had a rough winter since the 2 trees from the cluster closest to the pond had dead leaves on them when I first visited, while the others had living leaves. Once spring came and the trees got more color on them, I noticed that the trees still remained old looking. In early April, maintenance did some grooming of the plot and actually cut down the 2 dead parts. So what good is an American holly? Well, Cherokee and Catawba have both been known to use the berries to make dyes and to treat colics. Also, a decoction of leaves is used to treat measles and for sore eyes. The final tree species I had on my plot was a laurel oak. I named it Sweetheart because initially I thought that it was a sweet gum tree with all the sweet gum balls that I found around the base. This tree has always had leaves on it since the first day I started observing it and has had the largest canopy ever since. Aside from having the largest canopy, the laurel oak has a unique ethnobotanical quality. The Choctaw Indians used to boil the bark and make red paint with it. As you have witnessed through being introduced to these trees, it is fun to get to know your neighbors, as well as it is beneficial to know information about them. Plants and animals have a huge impact on the ecosystems and environment that you inhabit, so it is wise to get to know them. Just after meeting the 3 tree species discussed in this video, you've met 6 of my neighbors, and now have the knowledge about materials to potentially make dyes, paint, craft tool handles, and golf club heads, as well as relieve headaches and treat a whole assortment of ailments. So go out and meet some of your neighbors, you might discover some interesting things. And as one should always do with neighbors, treat them with respect and don't leave any of your things lying around their property.